now.
Okay, take two.
You're live, go ahead.
This is a public meeting of the Indiana Arts Commission Region 1 Arts Project Support Panel number 3. I'm Kelly Freeman, Executive Assistant with South Shore Arts and the Regional Partner for Region 1, representing Lake, Porter, and LaPorte counties. Today is Thursday, May 5th, 2022, and we are meeting online and streaming live for applicants and the public to observe. There is no contact between the panel and the audience about the disposition of the applicants before, during, or after the panel meeting. This meeting will be recorded and made available upon request. At this time, I will individually invite each panelist and staff to introduce themselves, stating their name, occupation, and where they are from the state. So I'm going to start with the panel, and Esther, would you please introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you. Good morning, everyone. I spend my time immersed in the arts. I'm Esther, and I'm involved as the proprietor of an art gallery and performance venue, an art advocate, consultant, educator, artist, and co-host of a radio program on the arts, and a board member of the Michigan City Urban Enterprise Association and based in LaPorte County. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Esther. Ashley.
Good morning. My name is Ashley Helper, and I'm with Albert's Diamond Jewelers. I am from Munster, Indiana, and I am a South Shore Arts board member amongst many other hats. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Ashley. Don.
Hi, I'm Don Parker. I'm the director of the Wanata Public Library in LaPorte County. I live in Wanata in LaPorte County. I'm a lifelong amateur bass violinist, and I serve as the vice president of the board of the South Shore Orchestra.
Thanks, Don. And Sam.
Hello, everyone. I'm Sam Love. I'm the editor of the Gary Anthology, which was published by Bell Publishing. I am an Indiana Arts Commission on-ramp fellow, as well as I was a program manager for the on-ramp Northwest Indiana group last year. And I am currently promoting a film that was produced with Indiana Humanities Council about the Calumet River watershed up here in Northwest Indiana. Thank you.
Thanks, Sam. Now I'll invite IAC staff to introduce themselves and their role here today.
Hi, everyone. I'm Paige Sharp. I'm the Deputy Director of Programs for the Indiana Arts Commission, and today I am just serving as the Tech Pro. Have a great panel.
Thanks, Paige. Now we'll begin the panel review process, and this is how it's going to work. I will announce the application, and we will review and ask the first reader to begin the discussion. The first reader will provide their assessment of the application based on the evaluation criteria and their perspectives. Panelists, please note that the applications do not need to be recapped since everyone has read them. Just provide your comments. After the first reader is finished, I will ask the second reader to present a new or additional or opposing comments. We're not looking for a consensus, just a full evaluation from the different perspectives panelists bring to this table. After the second reader has finished, I will open the discussion for all final comments. Remember, in the interest of time, we're only looking for new, additional, or opposing viewpoints. If a panelist has a conflict of interest, the panelist will be placed on hold. However, there are no conflicts in this interest in this panel. Finally, once the application has been reviewed by the full panel, we ask the panel to update their scores in the online system. It's common for scores to change as a result of this broader discussion. These scores will automatically save. Are there any questions? Okay, great. Let's begin. So our first application today is South Shore Performing Arts Company, and our first reader is Esther.
Yes, thank you. I want to first start with saying that I really appreciate the opportunity to review Region 1's IAC grant applications. And as in the past, I really marvel at what the community is involved with in producing and providing. And I'm really grateful to the IAC for constantly advocating and guiding and enriching experiences just in general, and also fine-tuning their grant process for these applications. So I'm reviewing the South Shore Brass Band Youth Day. And they have a very admirable program in its 13th year, and they provide a full experience to the chosen high school and their community. I think it was very clear what they do. They come in, they have their master class. I really appreciated the fact that all the music students at any point in their musical exploration are welcome to these master classes. And then the band ends with a community concert, and they, according to their narrative, they work very collaboratively with the school administration, the educators, the students, the audience members, and they provide an enriching experience. And as a reader of this, I can only imagine what an important connection this provides for the student, both the novice student not sure about what they want to do with their musical life, and the student who feels that the music career is their goal. To be in this room with these professional musicians must be a very enriching experience. I can suggest in maybe upcoming years that they include examples of feedback that influenced a change for them. They had stated that, they do thoughtfully look at that, but an example of that would be interesting, I think, and maybe not relevant to the application necessarily, but it really caused me to wonder if students stay in contact with this organization or the members of the band after the workshops, whether that is also part of this experience. And then let's see, and comment. Oh, and as a visual person, the flyers and the marketing materials were not particularly exciting to me, but I trust that after all these years, they get the intended job done. And it also wasn't clear where the advertising was placed to reach the greater community. I would assume that flyers are distributed throughout the high school, but they also stated in their narrative that the evening concert was open to the whole community. The budget seems in line. I just question the projected ticket sales of $1,000, as ticket sales that I read were not present in the narrative. I think it's a great program, and I'm very grateful to have reviewed this grant.
Thank you, Esther. Sam.
Yeah, just a couple of quick things here. I think everything's in line, and I agree with what Esther presented. Just some minor things. I was curious how they select the artists who perform. Is this a full group, or do they maybe have just part of the group come in? Maybe a little clarification of that in the narrative. I was really happy to see that they selected Couts for the reason that they had not performed on there before. So I'm really happy to see that they're conscious of where they've been. They're paying attention to geography, and they're making an effort to get out into the rural areas. Kind of a framing thing, I think, on the idea portion of it. I'd like to see this framed as we are going into a rural community. Rural communities are underserved when it comes to arts. We know this, what we do working here in Indiana. So just awareness of that, rather than kind of some of the boilerplate language. And one very minor thing, the timeline portion, I think everything looked great on the budget, but I like when timelines are listed as lists rather than these really long paragraphs. It just makes it easier to follow. You can visualize what they're doing. But I think what Esther said, they've been doing this for a long time. They know what they're doing. So it's all copacetic. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. I'll open it up to the panel for any new, additional, or opposing comments.
Sam, I just also wanted to mention that in comment to what you said, is that a lot of the schools petition, they take petitions from communities that would like to see the program, which I thought was a wonderful inclusion.
Thanks.
I have to agree with, sorry, Kelly. I
Nope,
have to agree
go ahead.
with one of Sam's last points. For me, I really like framing it as like serving a rural community. And I think that narrative might have, for me, it would have elevated it just a bit, but I thought it was a really wonderful endeavor. But I do like that idea of it being in a rural area. I think that was smart.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, panelists, please finalize your scores. Update your online comments and just let me know if you need more time. When you're ready, thumbs up or just a verbal. Thanks, Sam.
All finished.
Thank you,
I'm,
Esther.
I'm good.
Thank you, Don.
I'm good.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to application number 2, which is Teena's Legacy, and our first reader is Ashley.
Okay, thank you. Hello, everybody. And as I mentioned to Kelly, bear with me. This is my first official time on a panel like this, so I'm very honored, but I'm sure I'll have a few kinks to work out as I go along. So Teena's Legacy, I really thought that this was such a creative project. I've really not come across one of its kind. So I was proud that a vision like this existed in the community. I thought it was a really creative endeavor. Definitely benefiting a community, an underserved community. She speaks to the Gary community. And so for me, though, where I felt like this could be a little, I guess, clearer was I wasn't quite sure like who in the community this was speaking to. So, you know, I hear like reading like community groups, let me just, local groups is used a lot of that language, but I'm not quite sure still after reading it, like who exactly that target audience or that target group in the Gary community is. And I feel like that's going to happen a little bit later for her in this project. I think what I'm seeing is that the funds are going to be used for like an administrative part of this project. And right now it's just Ymca that is sort of overseeing this. And she is set to hire 2 project mentors that will recruit 3 community groups. So it's a little ambiguous for me. And I felt that maybe something a little clearer about how she's going to seek out these project mentors and what that part would look like, and outlining that in her proposal would be a little more helpful. But overall, I thought that this was very creative. I would have liked to have seen a little more organization as far as like measuring outcomes, a little clearer of a project management timeline. I felt like that could have been a little more clear in the proposal. But overall, like I said, I feel like the idea is there. It's a great idea. I just would have liked some of those categories to have been a little bit less ambiguous.
Thank you, Ashley. Our second reader is Don.
Thank you. And I apologize that I am not on video. I'm in a rural area where the, even though it's broadband, our bandwidth seems to be rather limited. And the internet has been moving very slowly for me this morning anyway. So I thought it wise not to take up additional bandwidth with video. Ashley did a really good job of summarizing all of the things that I felt about this project, both the positives and the concerns. The positives are that I also don't recall ever seeing a project like this be proposed, and at the same time instantly realize that the expression of art and the letting people who are in a difficult place know that they can still make art, and helping to guide them in the doing of that is a really valuable thing. And so I'm very impressed with just the ingenuity of of this project. I think where it suffers maybe a little bit, where the proposal suffers maybe a little bit, is mostly simply in the fact that this is a brand new project. And so there's a lot of ways that the IAC money is basically going to be seed money for what hopefully will work on an ongoing basis. But the fact that the IAC money as proposed is the sole funding source is a little bit of a concern for me. As Ashley said, the depth of both organizational support and identification of the market and the sheer number of people being served is also a little bit of a concern. So there are a bunch of things that I think we kind of need to take on faith here, and yet the basic idea I really love. And so my hope would be that if this carries forward, that they would work to really flesh out not only how they're identifying the participants, how they're measuring the impact, but also working to get some depth of community support from other organizations that maybe work with a similar population. And so other than that, great idea, and I hope it really works out well.
Thank you, Don. I'll open it up to the panel for any new additional or opposing comments.
Hi, Sam here. Excuse me. Well, I was glad to see the Grant Theater listed as the major community partner with that. That's a solid place of support in that community, in the Glen Park community of Gary. So it works largely independently and quite on the grassroots. So it would have been nice. I think what everybody said so far rings true if the proposal itself had reflected some of that. I personally know that that's a great community partner, but of course we go on what's in the proposal. So.
Right. This is Esther. I would also like to say just a basic comment is that while a lot of grants cover a lot of people, these grants that cover a very specific amount of people, like a small amount of people, have the ability to really improve and change lives and perspectives, especially where learning a skill is involved. That's all I wanted to say.
Okay, so panelists, please finalize your scores and update your online comments, and just let me know when you're ready.
Done.
Thanks, Don.
Finished.
Done.
Ready?
Okay. Application number 3 is the Caring Place. Our first reader is Sam.
Okay, let me just open my notes and get it to the right spot here. No.
Take your time.
Yeah, it's on here. I have full sentences here. Okay, here. I'm doing this all on my computer, not with paper, probably like I should have. Okay, well, I think this is a phenomenal proposal. It ticks all the boxes for me. So you have a solid partnership with the Lubeznik Center in place. What it's doing is developing and encouraging artistic expression in people who are experiencing domestic violence. So it's already working with an underserved and vulnerable community. One of the things that I really like is that there's a great sensitivity towards the people that they're serving and working with, and they've demonstrated flexibility and the ability to adjust to these situations. This project's only been in for 1 year, but as I read the proposal, I felt like they've been doing this for a very long time. The credentials for the artists are well explained and very clear and very impressive. Again, that Lubeznik Center connection gives them a powerhouse to work with. So yeah, everything looked good. Paying for artist, program director, prep supplies, documentation. I like to see documentation in there. I think the biggest thing we have to consider with something like this is who the project is serving. And it really seemed like they learned a lot from their first year. This is a second year project. I really got the sense from reading this proposal that they were very thoughtful in executing last year, but learning from last year and working that into what they want to do this year. So that's all I have with that.
Thanks, Sam. Esther.
Yeah, Sam covered all those points. I think this has great potential. I'm looking forward to what they do in the following years. I would have liked maybe just some more details about potential projects and how they address these sources of strength. Let me go down. And I was also curious as to whether the residents or the staff are included in the conversations about the projects. Just an aside. And I know I should have did paper as well. Yep, that's yeah, that's it. It was a very sensitive and thoughtful proposal. Thank you.
Thanks, Esther. Do we have any new, additional, or opposing views from the panel? Okay, please finalize your scores and update your comments and let me know when we're ready to move on.
I'm ready.
Thank you.
Done.
Thanks. Ashley, do you need a few more minutes?
No, I'm okay. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Oh, great. No, thank you. Okay. Our next application is the Duneland Family YMCA, and our first reader will be Don.
So this is a very long time solid program that yeah, here I'm if I stumble verbally, it's because I'm navigating my computer as well. It notes the program has been going on for 24 years, and this is a basic solid program where the YMCA is providing essentially enrichment activities for children and adults. And I don't really have a whole lot to say about it because it's well planned and I think well executed. I guess the one concern that I had is that the budget lists a variety of funding sources, and I am left with the question of whether or not that conflates that makes the budget for this particular program, a crafting program, simply part of a larger total budget that because if you're raising money from to cover this, as it says in the income from after school learning, from Zumba and line dancing, from Parents Night Out and other activities, then is that excess income that comes from those activities that then you use to fund your crafts program, or is it more that this becomes simply a component of a much larger spectrum of programs that the legitimate programming that the Y offers? As it's stated, the reimbursement to the people providing the programming comes to 30,000 and change out of a total budget for the program of 32,700 and change. It comes to about 92 or 93% of the budget being basically the reimbursement of the people doing the, leading the program. And obviously you want well qualified and properly compensated people providing the program, especially a well-established program. But it just kind of left me with those kind of questions with regards to how the budgeting for the program works. Other than that, it's clearly an excellent program serving an audience that um, includes many underserved kids that are coming in. I guess the other thing that I might have said about an underserved audience is that I did not see a lot on how there's an assurance that people that, for example, have limited ability to get to the facility for these programs can get there. In other words, underserved includes people that have limits in terms of the transportation that's available to them, and whether there's any kind of partnership working with the school district or some the Porter County Agency on Aging to use buses to help get people that might have difficulty economically getting to the facility for the programming to be able to get there and experience the programming. But basically an excellent, well-established program that I really like. Thanks.
Thank you, Dan. Our second reader is Ashley.
Hi, I really, my thoughts and impression are very much in line with Don's on this. One of the areas, like he had mentioned, was sort of, like for me, I didn't really see an answer to the question directly of, will the proposed project directly benefit or support the work of Indiana artists in a measurable way? Echoing what Don had said, I feel like this grant could be part of a just much larger pot, and that's why for me it was a little bit vague. I do see at one point in the, does the project demonstrate its artistic quality? They do mention in sort of section 2, like 3 local artists will be directly impacting our community. So perhaps that would have been an opportunity maybe to develop that language and sort of, outline how, people would benefit as far as like artists, because these are the artists that are directly involved with this. And then one of the things that I wanted to bring up is that I think what organizations have to keep in mind, especially when they are working with underserved communities, is that people have very limited access, not only to transportation, especially when it comes to children, but adults. They might not have the internet. They might not have Wi-Fi. They might not have a computer or access to any of those things. And so for me, seeing that they are, measuring their impact based on surveys and comments that are shared on Facebook or Instagram or websites, I'm not sure how sustainable that measurement process is, just because a lot of these people may not even know how to use the internet, or they don't have a great internet connection. I mean, look at some of us. We're all, in a kind of a different boat, and some of our internet is shoddy. So just keeping that in mind for me with organizations like this, where that's where they're looking to see where their impact lies, is that, there needs to be something more maybe substantial, considering the audience that they are trying to engage.
Thanks, Ashley.
Thanks.
So I'll open up this to the panel. Any new opposing views?
Just also, like for me, it would have been interesting, because this is a membership organization. It would be interesting to know what kinds of discounts and scholarships, and whether they ever provide full scholarships for family in need to participate. I would have appreciated that being included in the narrative.
Thank you, Esther. If there's no one else, panelists, please finalize your scores and update your comments.
Done.
Thank you. Okay. The next application is the Town of Munster Board of Parks and Recreation, and Don is our first reader.
This is a community arts festival. It's in its second year. I really liked that there is, it seems to me to be a lot of support provided, and yet to the artists making for their ability to get there and be a part of the festival. I consider that a benefit. The number of actual festival artist participants being served, to me, is a really positive thing. Whether that's just to help to keep the costs down for the participants or not, I was kind of intrigued as to what I thought was a relatively low number of total participants that they listed. They show here 1128. And I would think that, it's only in its second year, I guess, with this grant proposal. But I would think that in an urban area such as Munster, that I would think that's an undercount. And again, I think that, leans well towards the project. Well, I guess 1428 if adults and children, but nevertheless, it is in the midst of an area that has a great mix of people that will include underserved, primarily economically underserved persons, but because of where it is, it's still, I think, pretty easy to get to. So overall, I liked the concept, the basic funding structure. I guess it seems to be that it's being run fairly economically on a total budget of just under $10,000. And I guess the only concern I had was it's always the organization that I'm a part of. We struggle with effective ways of measuring participation amongst potentially underserved audiences. And, again, the organization that I'm a part of is basically just a bunch of artists that want to make art and share it with people. And if the danger with something like that is if you let people self-select rather than working as hard as possible to really, make them understand that the art is accessible to them, then you can get self-selection amongst underserved audiences. And so I would like to see more about how they will continue to work to make sure that the attendees, that to potential attendees, they are saying, this is for you just because you think you don't have the money or the interest or the skill to make art and participate in art, that you would be surprised. And so come and be a part of this event. So I guess a little bit more on serving an underserved audience. Other than that, a very good project.
Thanks, Dan. Our second reader is Sam.
Yeah, just building off what Don said, a couple of things. One of the things I really liked about this is they've done a lot of research into the community. I mean, even thinking of things like, the immediate Munster community, realizing that maybe half the people who come into Munster don't live here. So half the people who use Munster resources don't live in Munster. And they're aware of that, and they want to find a balance between locals and regionals. So I thought that was really good. Attention to special needs and accessibility at the performance site. Good, clear timeline. What I would expect from a municipal-based project. So I'd love to see that. My only question, really, and I have this question for every proposal where the artists are not already selected, is what would be the criteria for selecting performers? Obviously, it's well established that they're looking for ethnic diversity with musicians and dance, and they even list out some of the cultures they'd like to engage with that. But and where they're looking, colleges, language clubs, things like that. But when it comes down to picking who's going to be on the stage and who isn't, it'd be nice to see, who's making that decision or what criteria they might be using. And that is all.
Thanks, Sam. I'll open it up to the rest of the panel for any new or opposing views. Okay, please finalize your scores and update the online system and let me know when you're ready. Thank you, Sam.
All good.
Thank you.
I'm good.
I'm good.
Okay. So our next application is Tap 20 Inc. And our first reader is Esther.
Just give me a moment.
So take your time, please.
All right, this is a South Shore dance. Wait, let me get sorry. The South Shore Dance Alliance. I'm sorry, I should have written it down too completely. The Summer Intensive Dance Workshop and Productions. It's a 5-week intensive in. So just with the, it looks like a wonderful program. They have very talented artists that are providing the instruction. Except that, in the bio, it wasn't clearly reflected in the bios that all of the artists are living in Indiana presently. They all have a connection to Indiana, but it appears that maybe only 2 are living in Indiana. That was one thing that I had noticed. I appreciate what they're doing. They are I like that they are trying to really engage the age range that they're targeting by taking classics with traditional elements, but then shaking it up with a contemporary input. It adds interest and vibrancy and relevance for the students. The artistic example links did not work for me, so I can't comment on that. I did do a search and looked at their dance on their website, and it looks extremely enriching and engaging. And actually, I feel enriched knowing that this organization exists. Get to community. I mean, it hits all the idea goals. I would just, I would question when we that they are expecting only 30 students to participate. And it seemed like when they were doing their participating things, they kind of, for the adults, they did it with adults that were participating in the program probably as audience members, but they didn't reflect the same with the students. So I'm just assuming that they are only expecting possibly 30 students to participate. So I think that wasn't very clear to me. I'm sorry, I'm so scattered on this one.
That's okay, Esther, thank you.
Let me go down to. This year, it seems like they had stated that they mostly focused on Gary students, but they were looking to create a more diverse student population, and we're going to reach out further for that. So that would be, I would have liked to have known more about what they were planning to do. And go back to the budget. Yeah, everything. It's you know, it's a very clear, was a very clear project, what their goals were. I appreciate that they exist. And that's, again, I apologize for being so scattered on it. I thought my notes were clear, but they certainly are not. It would help if I could read my writing.
Thanks, Esther. Our
No,
second
thank you.
reader is Ashley.
Thank you. I thought that this proposal was very well written, very well organized. I think it did a great job on answering questions directly. So for me, I think that everything from their goal to measurable outcomes, demonstrating artistic quality, all of the categories for me were just, it was really, really well written and very easy to follow because there was just so much information there. And like someone had mentioned earlier, they answered the questions, which, you know, for me was very important. I was especially impressed with the range of recruitment possibilities. And I think that, as I had mentioned before, taking those recruitment or community outreach beyond just social media and beyond the internet, especially when you are working with underserved, is so important. And I liked that they had scheduled, or they had conference calls, they had scheduled presentations for school and community meetings, face-to-face and telephone contact with parents. So I think that that was also very important to mention, that and to add that they did to me, or they're going to do an exceptional job of community outreach. So that's just one thing that I would like to add in addition to what Esther had already outlined.
Thank you, Ashley. Open it up to the panelists for any additional or opposing views.
Just a really strong proposal generally. I agree with what's already been said.
Thanks, Dan.
I did want to add too, I'm sorry, like Esther, my notes are a little bit all over the place. I really appreciated their ability and their recognition of needing to sort of adapt to, you know, life after COVID. I thought that that was very, very significant for this proposal. And I was happy to see that they had modified their program to provide services and had taken an input from their community, especially in the last 2 years, on how people had been impacted by COVID. I thought that that was very smart, and I liked that they included that. I think that's very important.
Thank you. Any additional comments? Okay, panelists, go ahead and finalize your scores and update them in the online system and let me know when you're ready.
I'm ready.
Ready?
Ready.
Great, thank you. Okay. Next, we have the town of Cherville, and our first reader today is going to be Don.
This is community concert. It was just mentioned that, you know, their COVID interrupted a lot of things. And this is an event with, I think, with previous history in the town of Cherville. I know that the number of area communities arranged to have groups such as the Northwest Indiana Symphony come and conduct a community concert. I think this is generally a really strong proposal. They have a terrific venue that is accessible to people with limited mobility. Both it's accessible to people without vehicular transportation, and they make an effort to provide a section at the concert for people with individuals with mobility issues. I think it's interesting that this is a proposal that I assume was probably put together by non-arts people. A lot of us are arts people, and this is simply the Parks Department wanting to provide, I assume the Parks Department wanting to provide good programming that benefits the community. And so they don't think of the audience as participants. So and as we've already seen, some of our proposals do think of the audience as participants. So the number of persons they do reference as having over 1,000 people that attend these concerts. And I think that should be noted. The numbers as recorded in the application could be misconstrued. Other than that, the only other, so I think generally it's a really strong project. And the only other comments I have was that this is another example of, it's really hard to provide, I think, effective feedback on how the community receives the concert, other than, well, a lot of people showed up. So in that respect, it's clearly something the community wants, and you will get a certain percentage of people that come to an event like this that don't think of themselves as orchestra people wanting to attend an orchestra concert, wanting to attend something with stuffy classical music. And so maybe a little bit more on the program itself, because if people know what's on the program and know that, okay, you're not going to be hearing just all Beethoven, that can help with the self-selection that an audience for this kind of an event tends to do. And so the question then becomes, if you're really serving the idea principle, how do you get past that? And I think that I feel certain that this program will not be all Beethoven, for example, but how do they market that to the community to let them know that even if you if you think that hip hop is your preferred, musical form, this is still something for you, other than just the fact that, it's a community get together to some extent, and that can help people turn out, but more on the how do we actually overcome some of that self-selection that happens. And so overall, a really good project. Thank you.
Thanks, Don. Sam?
Yeah, Don articulated something that was kind of mulling around in my mind so well about that engagement with the audience. But I'm at a point where the only quibble I could point out is, you don't need to put 2 or 3 spaces in between a period and the start of the next sentence. So at that point, I guess what I really liked about it is, again, these municipal proposals where they have a really clear timeline and a really clear chain of command. They've proven that they can get these things done and reach the community that way. So really, that's all I have to add. This was a solid one.
Thank you, Sam. Are there any additional or opposing views from the rest of the panel? Okay, if you can please finalize your scores and update your online comments.
Done.
Thank you.
Done.
Thank you. I'm done.
Okay. Our next application is the Town of St. John, and Esther is our first reader. Esther, are you still with us?
Oops, sorry, I was talking on mute.
Oh, sorry. I couldn't see.
Okay, so this project is St. John, Tradition and Growth. They chose a local known photographer to document St. John and its inhabitants, and he has previous experience with this type of project. It's not known, though, via the narrative how he was chosen. And I did not get, from the application, I did not get a sense of community involvement really in any way. By narrative, it appears that only the town administration and the photographer are collaborating. I needed to make many assumptions while reading this. Like, my mind filled in blanks that should have been in the narrative. The photographer stated that he walks around the town and just like stops at a garage sale and asks if he can take somebody's photograph, and which is all valid, but I still did not get a sense that the community was actually involved in what they wanted to show. And where I jumped in assumption is where the photographs would ultimately live, and how accessible they would be. And so for me, that would be, I would love to see them in, or I would like the outcome that like maybe they're in the schools and the elementary schools and the middle schools, and students might see a parent, a relative, or a neighbor, and then they can connect to the greater town in that way. I looked through the links they provided and went quite deeply into their social media and could not find any mention of this project, even though they say it's been in the works for several years, I think. So I went very deeply into their photographs. So personally, I would have liked much more detail and a sense of more community involvement. Are these photos going to be in the grocers, at the mechanics, at small boutiques, coffee shops, and not just municipal buildings? The budget seemed fair. Let me guess. Sorry, now I have to jump to the computer. Let's see about the budget. Oh, and then from the narrative, it only seems like the officials and the stakeholders are part of the decisions on what photographs were going to be chosen. So once again, I would like that. I would just like to know about more actual community involvement. Other than that, the budget seemed quite reasonable. So thank you.
Thank you, Esther. Our second reader is Ashley.
Okay. I shared a lot of the same feedback with Esther, so I won't be redundant, but I would like to just add a few things. First, when, sort of looking at the project and its artistic quality and support and sort of that area of the proposal, he mentions that the grant, or that this project, the grant enables the artists in town collectively to foster a sense of attachment to this place. I feel like that's a little bit intangible. And so what I would have liked to have seen is later on sort of, well, how will they know? How will they foster this sense of attachment? And really outlining a strategy for that. I do think that photographs are incredibly important to society from a historical standpoint. So I do love that these are going to be around for a very long time. But that also kind of leads me to the other part for me, is that, like, looking at some of the photos that were a part of his examples, I'm looking at this from someone, because it's photography. So all we have sometimes is visually what is in front of us. And I'm just trying to look for the story that these photos are telling. What would these photos tell somebody 40, 50, 60, 70, 100 years from now? And I'm not quite sure that I'm there yet with the photos. I mean, if you have them in front of you, I think they're beautiful photos, but I'm not quite sure what story they're telling about the town of St. John. So that for me, and he does acknowledge that the town is not diverse racially, but then that's kind of where it ends. So I'm kind of not seeing, how this is a project that speaks to the diversity of an underserved community. And just looking at the demographics of St. John, I mean, racially, it's got a, 92% Caucasian. The average household income is, I think, like $130,000. So for me, that component was a little bit lacking. I would have liked to see maybe a creative way to incorporate, that into the proposal. And I also see that he recognizes a tension in the town between inclusion and diversity. And so for me, I think this is where I would love to see an improvement for the future, is that let's take photos that actually depict that. Because the photos look very idyllic and they're very beautiful, but I think part of the reason why he, in addition to taking the photos of a town that was developing, wanted to speak to some of the challenges that town, sort of the growth pains that town was experiencing. And I just don't see that in the photos themselves. They're not reflective of that tension. And I think it could have been maybe a little more impactful to have photos that depicted that. So that's where I'll leave it. But overall, I value photography. I'm sure he's very talented, but maybe just a little bit of an adjustment to maybe the vision and for future photos and what they could look like.
Great, thank you, Ashley. Now I'll open up to the rest of the panel for any additional or opposing views.
Sorry.
Go on, Don.
I just wanted to say that that my concerns were exactly as already expressed. I think the artistic concept is really strong. The management looks really strong, but how the community as a whole is involved in deciding the makeup of the project is not clear, and that in my mind, art is supposed to challenge as well. And it's great that an art project can make a community think about itself, which I think this would, but how will it challenge the community to be better? How will it bring across some of those challenges that the community faces, such as Ashley, already mentioned? Thanks.
Thanks, Don. Sam, did you want to add something?
Yeah, this is a type of project I want to see more municipalities do. I was excited by this one, even, St. John might not be the most exciting place, but I'm glad to see that that's happening, that engagement between artists and the political community is happening. But everything that's been said is right on par and should be amplified. And I would hope that these thoughts can get taken into consideration with this project, because I think with this one, there needs to be, what's the preservation, or as it was brought up earlier, like, where do they live on after this? It needs to be contextualized that way. Otherwise, it doesn't have the purpose that they want it to have. It needs to be able, even a generation or two down the road, need to be able to look at this and go, this is what they were doing. Because I find stuff like this all the time in the historical archives around this region. So I hope other communities do this, but with more thought towards, even if not just engaging the whole community in the development of the project, at least engaging the community in the accessibility of the project, because that's absolutely critical. Thank you.
Thanks, Sam.
I also think that they chose a photographer that is fully capable of doing that. It's just like Ashley stated, I just don't think he has the story, or St. John doesn't have the story in mind yet, because in his past work, he certainly can tell a story, but you're like completely spot on with the images just don't have that connection to place.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Panelists, please finalize your scores and update your comments.
Done.
Thank you.
Done.
Finished.
Okay. Next up is Trade Winds Services, and our first reader is Ashley.
Okay, let me just shift gears.
Please take your time.
St. John. Okay. All right, so I can start. Trade Winds, very solid program and a very well written proposal, in my opinion. The goal of this particular program is to provide enrichment activities with the clients at Trade Winds via arts and crafts in various mediums. These grants seemingly provide for improved focus on planning and coordination of activities. I do appreciate that they are identifying, and reaching out to the underserved and very diverse communities, with 88% of those that they serve being from households under $30,000 with a high minority ratio. So I do think that that is very important. And the remaining portions of the proposal are very solid, very identifiable. One of the things that for me, once again, is how, with now this like changed world that we've lived in, where a lot of things have gone virtually, communication styles have changed. I would have maybe liked to see a little bit, maybe outline or description of how they can accommodate their participants in this way, if they are, for whatever reason, not able to participate in person, because I'm not quite sure that some of the clients would benefit from something via Zoom, in my opinion. And the other part of it too is that, and speaking again to the measuring of outcomes, the measuring of impact, and that this is once again something that we'll see in front of them. We'll see that those that are participating, the feedback is tangible, it's right in front of you. But I think from a longer lasting standpoint, I'm trying to find my note on that, so I'm a little scattered right now. But primarily that their residents do not have access to, or maybe not be able to use some of the technology that they are outlining in the proposal as a way to measure impact. So maybe just a little consideration there, but ultimately it's a very solid program. Artistic expression for the residents is very important to the whole process. So it's a great program. I know I can't really, but it is a very great program indeed. So
Thank you, Ashley. Our second reader is Don.
Ashley covered most of the things that I thought were notable. It's a strong program. I was surprised and yet not really surprised to see that it's in its 32nd year. And the artistic goals are good. The management is good. And I think in one respect, this is an easier audience to pursue effective measurement and working with the goals and expressed in the idea concept, simply because it's a higher needs audience. And so I thought that the value in terms of the overall cost of the program as projected virtual versus the number of persons being served also makes it a really good value program. And Ashley brought up one point that I had simply not considered, which was that this is also an audience that in the COVID pandemic would have been even more difficult to effectively serve. I hate to put it just in dollar terms, but your cost per participant is going to be relatively high for a program like this anyway, and even more so in the challenge of a pandemic when you're trying to determine what kind of activities, if any, can be delivered over Zoom. And so my hat's off to Tradewinds about this program. And I just think overall it's a terrific program, and they do better, I think, than most, because they in terms of working with the idea concept, because it's an audience that clearly requires the follow-up in terms of what's working with this particular person, with this particular individual.
Yeah.
So excellent program.
I do want to add, I did make a mistake and I want to apologize. I have, if you can imagine what my desk looked like with all the notes and packets, it probably looked like a lot of yours right now. I actually, when I was talking about tools and methods for measuring the project's impact, I had made a mistake and I had mixed that up with another another grant proposal. When I had discussed like social media as a way to measure impact, it is not relevant to this, and I do not see any mention of that in their proposal, which kind of alerted me to my error. So I just wanted to sort of strike that from the record, if you will, and just make it known that I do think that considering the participants, their tools and methods for measuring impact are very much in line and consistent with the people that they're serving. So just please make that note.
Thank you for the clarification, Ashley.
Thank you.
Do we have any new or additional comments from the rest of the panel? Okay, if you can please finalize and update your scores.
Done.
I'm done.
Finished.
Great. All right, the next application we are reviewing is the Volunteer Office for Community Accessibility Resource and Training. Our first reader is Sam.
Okay, so this is looking to do a sensory festival, stipends for 5 artists with indirect support for more. It's a second-year project, volunteer run, as it says in the name, and it is run by people with disabilities. Very interesting idea, but a couple of issues come up, and I think on what has been said in a previous one, a lot of assumptions that I had to make as I was reading it. So first of all, I think the mission statement, and I think mission statements are actually important. Everything flows out from that. So it's a bit vague in spots, and I think it needs a bit more qualification. It's too open, and I would like to see something that's really specifically getting at how they do their outreach and things like that. I was left wondering what kind of feedback from the event last year is going to be considered when planning this second event and going forward in the future. There really wasn't much there. In fact, on the question specifically of what tools and methods would be used to measure the project's impact, the answer simply just says social media and surveys. 4 words, that's it. So I'd like to see more with that to get a sense of who this group is and sort of what direction they want to go in with that. Is it working with, is it a small group having a party, or is this more of, an outreach or some kind of public connection with this event? That's what I wasn't really able to get at. There are some very nice touches in here. I like that they're doing this on the anniversary of the ADA. The space they've selected is an outdoor space with universally designed elements to it, with the only one in Northwest Indiana, according to the proposal. There are considerations for visual aids, American Sign Language interpreters, and they're increasing their virtual offerings. So I think there's a great consideration to all of that. There's a really good press release that's kind of buried in the middle of this proposal that has elements that should have been mentioned elsewhere in there. So, doing grants, you don't want to make us look for that. You need to put it in our faces. So there's some good in there. Couple of things that I am concerned by. First, I mentioned before, the artists are not selected yet. So what is the criteria for picking these artists? How will they do that? Where are they drawing from? It does say that most of the artists have a connection directly to Gary, but without names or some sort of explanation, we're really not sure who they're working with. In the budget, it says at the beginning that if I've read this correctly, and I've actually read this a number of times, probably to the point where I'll start confusing myself. So if I'm missing something, the next readers, please catch me. But it seemed to say they're going to pay $100 stipends to 5 artists. But then when I looked at the actual budget list, it says $2,500 for artists. There was also a listing of 10 artists being indirectly benefited. So I don't, that circle needs to be squared for me. So I would say the budget it looks like it needs to be revisited before moving forward. And there really isn't a proper timeline for this event. Now, this event will occur on the anniversary of the ADA, which is in later July of this year. So this is actually fairly quick because it's the beginning of May here. So it's just a few months, and it's just 2 sentences that, well, we're going to do this. That monthly listed rollout, I think, is so critical because there are so many elements to putting on an event like this. And from the proposal, we have the qualifications of one person who's running it. And there's no doubt about those credentials or her ability to put events on. But where is the support? Who is the support? These things are absolutely critical. So it'd be nice to see that in there. So I would say, I think the budget needs to be fixed, or at least clarified, that artistic support part of it. The rest of it's fine. Travel, the sign language, interpreters, visual aids, things like that. That's all copacetic. Just that part about the artist confused me. And I think a timeline, at least a monthly timeline at this point, would be necessary. Thank you.
Thanks, Sam. Our second reader is Esther.
I 100% agree with those points. Sam, I would also like to say that I'm hoping, again, I'm assuming that when they needed to submit the grant, they didn't know, but hopefully I'm assuming again that they know who their artists are at this point in the game, since the timeline is so short. And while what Sam said is true, I think projects like this need a chance to develop what they want to say. I think that the community that they're serving is 100% within the IDEA guidelines, and they have a very engaging, bright poster. So they're thinking about that. I was really curious as to the approximate number of volunteers involved in the planning and implementation. I was very concerned, like Sam mentioned, about all of those details being missing, but they did it 1 year. So I'm hoping that they did get a wealth of information from what they did, and that they have the community support. They just didn't reflect that in this grant, which hopefully they will seek guidance with the grant in future years, and reach out to the community in a deeper way so that they can fill in some of those blanks in their application. But I'm very impressed by what they want to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Esther. Are there any new or additional comments, opposing views from the rest of the panel? Okay, panelists, please finalize your scores and update the online system.
Done.
Thank you.
Done.
Finished.
Finished.
All right. We're going to move on to Whiting Robertsdale Community Improvement Corporation, and our first reader is Don.
This is, you could pick up a lot of what I said with regards to Sherrville's application for a NISO summer concert and drop it right in here, only like on steroids, because this is it says the 28th year of the Whiting Civic Improvement, basically, Association, providing now, I don't know if it's always been 4, but now it's currently 4 summer concerts by an orchestra that they put together themselves. And so you have a very well-established event that obviously serves its community well, or they would not have been doing it for almost 3 decades with 4 concerts dropped in every summer and still get a good turnout for it. So artistically, it's a terrific project. Management is all there, obviously, after 30 years of a project this big, because I think this is the biggest budget of any of the projects we've been looking at today, and a well-developed community support structure for the event series itself, in that the The IAC grant will only make up about 6 or 7% of the total budget. So there's another indicator of how well the community supports the event, and how well they manage it. And so once again, it all comes down to how do you really ensure, according to some of the principles of these particular grants that we're awarding, how do you ensure that you're serving a diverse audience? And that is simply always a challenge, because an event like this, precisely because it's free, so they've removed that barrier to attendance, is self-selecting to a certain extent. You get people that will be afraid that it's such a crowd, they don't want to have to navigate it with their limited mobility. You will get people that say, well, it's an orchestra concert and I don't want to listen to nothing but Beethoven. And that's balanced to some extent by the fact that these are such a community event, something that people go to just because it makes you feel like you're such a part of that community. But then again, the challenge is, how do you reach the people that think that would be welcome if they showed up? You would make them welcome if they showed up, but they think that it's not for them, and because of any number of reasons. And so the challenge is always making sure that you're doing as much outreach as possible, and to an effective form or forms of outreach into your audience. And so I would like to see a little more about that. Clearly, it's a successful project, and a well-developed project, and yet you always need to, if you're trying to make sure that you're serving as diverse as an audience as possible, then you need to work harder on how you're contacting that audience and getting their input. And mind you, I don't have any really good answers for that. It just kind of takes a lot of just putting your head down and keep trying. So overall, an excellent project. A little more on working the concepts of idea would be better.
Thank you, Don. Our second reader is Esther.
Yes, in reading this grant, I was filled with a sense of joy, to learn, and based on the narrative, that the maestro enjoys the aspect of interaction with the audience in a very engaging way, and wants to add education as part of it. Just really gave a good sense of what the experience is like, and that they really think about it. This experience has really the potential to make lots of intergenerational memories, these outdoor concerts. I do agree with John completely. Free admission does not necessarily make it welcoming to everyone. Just the inclusion of free admission on a poster or media. I would, and I've mentioned this before with other applications, that while the posters might have, and after 27 years, yes, they probably have, a clear sense of where their marketing is going out to. But I would like to see that kind of updated and more marketing examples shown. I didn't get a sense of where this was marketed to, but it was a really strong application. And like I said, it just made me happy to know that it was going on, and that everybody who works on it seems to enjoy creating the experience. Thank you.
Thank you, Esther. I'd like to open it up to the rest of the panel for any additional or opposing views. Okay, panelists, please finalize your scores and update the online system.
Done.
Done.
All right, everybody, this is the last grant that we'll be reviewing today. WJOB radio station, and our first reader is Ashley.
Okay. WJOB and the Philippa Temper Show of Notoriety is a solid program. I believe entering in its 5th year, according to the proposal. They had to consider their financial needs and reevaluate their financial needs at the station, largely in part because of the impact of COVID. And so now they are requiring financial payment for airtime, and broadcast shows need financial underwriting. This program, Phil's program, highlights and is a very creative method of bringing attention to various arts initiatives throughout the community. He's an active part of the Northwest Indiana community, and so he is very in tune with, I think, a lot of, as he had stated, overlooked organizations in need of coverage. So underserved organizations that might not have the outreach capabilities, he is there to highlight them on the show. And it is a radio show, so it's a auditory engagement, essentially, if you're just listening on the radio. But what I do like is that they also go Facebook Live with the show. So, you know, I believe it reaches approximately $3 million, or I'm sorry, 3 million people is what the outreach was identified as. So people listening on the radio will hear his program, but then it also has a Facebook Live component, which I think is very creative, because that means that people that miss the radio, the show, listening from wherever they may be, can also watch it later and continually share whichever program or whichever organization was highlighted with Phil. So I think that that is very important, being a radio show. I feel that the project itself has been managed in a very capable and effective way throughout the years. From a management and a sort of staffing standpoint, they don't really have a lot of staff, so to speak, but I do think that the show and the station is very well managed. And so he does have a 1-hour show each week. So I think that the frequency of it is there for me as well. It's ongoing. And then when I look to the expenses, I feel that the ask, the IAC grant, is a reasonable portion of the overall, budget for this, and that it's definitely a program that is well supported in our community, and that's pretty evident by people that have also participated in it as well. So once again, I do feel that it's a solid program and a solid overall proposal.
Thank you, Ashley. Our second reader is Sam.
So this is interesting. I think this is my 3rd year reviewing these grants, and every year we end with me as a second reader for a local radio arts program, and this year is no different. And every time I, as a former American government teacher, like to talk about how public radio waves, free radio, is so critical. But Ashley already brought up the digital divide in a previous review, so I don't need to do that. All I need to do is say, I think this is fantastic. I love that there is a bit of a documentary aspect that they put into this proposal. I love that they've got the radio and the internet, but also his newspaper column. So they're doing the best you can do with reach. And I think a project like this is so valuable. This is public money, right? This is state money that we're using, and this is getting right back into something that goes immediately back into the public. So absolutely wonderful, and I will end it there.
Thank you, Sam. Do we have any new additional or opposing views from the rest of the panel? All right. Panelists, please finalize your scores, update the online comments. And since this is the last one, you don't need to let me know when you're ready. I'm going to go ahead and conclude this meeting. So this concludes the Region 1 Arts Project Support Grant Review Panel Number 3. Applicants will be notified of the status of their grant following the June commission meeting. If you have any questions, please contact me, your grant program manager. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you guys all so very